Veronica. Look, it's got to be Veronica, the girl in the red skirt. I definitely stuck my tongue down her throat.
That was me.
And Sinatra comes in wearing a members-only jacket. And it's got his name on it, Frank, like we didn't know who he was. And he's drunk. And he's kind of nasty.
I was just in here yesterday, and when I was there, I left my glasses in the washroom, and I didn't remember which one.
Ever wondered what scandals lurk behind Hollywood's golden era? Discover the shocking tales of your favorite stars and their battles with the bottle in our countdown of the 25 worst drunken demons in Hollywood history. Number 25, Robert Mitchum.
Robert Mitchum was one of the great icons of American cinema. Though he passed away in 1997, he's still remembered as one of our greatest actors. But despite his incredible success, he wasn't the most disciplined person. His childhood antics carried into his adulthood, and he eventually developed a reputation for being a big drinker.
Imagine a Hollywood star whose off-screen life was as wild as his on-screen roles. Robert Mitchum's deep voice and rugged charm hid a tumultuous personal life filled with barroom brawls and drunken escapades. His most famous incident? Urinating on producer David O. Selznick's carpet after 8 double scotches. The stories of Mitchum as a man who was relaxed and mellow in his cups are almost as common as those of him as a rambunctious hellraiser. There are the tales of barroom brawls and furious arguments with directors and fellow actors who provoked his ire. Drinking certainly got him into a lot of trouble. He had been drinking scotch, lots of it, the night he drove up to Lila Leeds' house in Hollywood and got busted for possession of narcotics. Meanwhile, one of his barroom brawls resulted in the hospitalization of the heavyweight boxer Bernie Reynolds. Needless to say, Mitchum didn't fight by Marquis of Queensberry rules, and he drank, by his own reckoning, at least 8 double scotches before visiting producer David O. Selznick of Gone with the Wind fame in his plush penthouse suite to discuss the possibility of a starring role in an adaptation of Ibsen's A Doll's House. Mitchum suddenly felt the need to go to the bathroom, reckoned he wouldn't be able to make it, and simply urinated all over Selznick's carpet. He didn't get the part. After a lifetime smoking cigarettes, died from 1997 from complications due to lung cancer and emphysema. Number 24, Elizabeth Taylor.
Rehab, medical malpractice, and a heartbreaking confrontation with her son. Even Hollywood's brightest star had a dark side. By 1981, Taylor's addiction issues had reached a crisis point, as the star surrounded herself with people who enabled her, and the doctors who could supply her with prescription medication.
Hollywood's most dazzling star, Elizabeth Taylor, had a dark side that stunned the world. For over 3 decades, her life spiraled into addiction, leading her to a public and groundbreaking stint in rehab. Discover the shocking depths of her struggles. One of the most famous classic Hollywood stars, Elizabeth Taylor, spent over 3 decades of her career addicted to alcohol and painkillers. She became the first celebrity to openly admit herself to rehab at the Betty Ford Center in 1983. Number 23, Samuel L. Jackson.
It's not a date. It's definitely not a date.
Jules Winfield, Mace Windu, and Nick Fury walk into a bar one day, and the bartender says to them, "Elijah Price, Glass is being filmed in another set." Yes, today we will tell you about the life of a theater and film actor who almost doomed himself to a sad end with a terrible addiction.
You know Samuel L. Jackson is a box office powerhouse. But did you know his early career was almost destroyed by addiction? His turnaround story is one for the ages, beginning with a role that hit close to home. Samuel L. Jackson is a highly successful actor, having appeared in over 100 films, and is currently the second highest grossing actor of all time. During most of his early career as a stage actor, he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol. His first role upon completing rehab was as a cocaine addict in Jungle Fever, the film that launched his cinematic career. Number 22, Herman J Manowitz. What if I told you the man behind Citizen Kane was a notorious drunk with a vendetta? Herman J Mankowitz's life was a whirlwind of genius, scandal, and revenge, fueled by his addiction. Henry J Manowitz was a screenwriting genius who had secretly helped construct classic films such as Monkey Business and Duck Soup by the Marx Brothers and The Wizard of Oz. He was also a raging drunk who picked fights everywhere he went and insulted everyone from studio execs to actors in his films. Manowitz had once been friends with newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst and attended many parties at San Simeon, the publisher's infamous mansion. The relationship ended, however, when Hearst banned Manowitz after the screenwriter kept trying to get Hearst's mistress, Marion Davies, drunk. Manowitz sought revenge. He began writing a script about a newspaper mogul and used everything he knew about Hearst to humiliate him, including basing one character on Davies in a harshly negative portrait, and even appropriating what he knew to be Hearst's special nickname for Davies. The script, of course, was Citizen Kane, which would become a cinematic landmark and win Manowitz an Oscar. Number 21, Raymond Chandler.
Veronica. Look, it's got to be Veronica, the girl in the red skirt. I definitely stuck my tongue down her throat.
That was me.
Look, when I've been drinking, sometimes I tend to get a little overly friendly, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right.
That's okay.
Raymond Chandler's rise from fired oil executive to top-notch writer is legendary, but his journey was marred by a love for drink. His most famous stunt? Writing The Blue Dahlia while on a non-stop alcohol binge. Raymond Chandler was fired from his job as an oil industry executive at 44 due to his over-enthusiastic alcohol consumption. From there, he became a top-notch fiction writer, which led to a contract with Paramount. But Chandler never lost his love for drink. Before writing The Blue Dahlia, which needed to be written, filmed, and completed in just 3 months. Chandler assured producer John Houseman he was sober. In the middle of production, though, he told Houseman he'd been felled by writer's block and could only complete the script in a continuous alcohol siege. He drank nonstop and ate no solid food for the next 8 days, as Paramount provided a doctor to inject glucose into his arm twice daily. He finished the script on time and was nominated for Best Original Screenplay Oscar. It was later revealed that the whole thing had been a ruse to fool Houseman. He had never stopped drinking and used the writer's block story to gain leverage. Number 20, Barbara Payton.
You may not have heard of Barbara Payton before. Her career was short-lived. She only starred in movies from 1950 to 55. Her career ended with drug abuse, prostitution, and a stint in Mexico as a madam.
Barbara Payton's life was a tragic Hollywood tale of beauty and scandal. Her descent into alcoholism and chaos was as dramatic as any movie she starred in. Her heartbreaking end is a stark reminder of fame's darker side. Starting out as a small-town Minnesota girl, this gorgeous blonde ran off to Hollywood, and it wasn't long before she became one of the biggest stars of the 1940s and 50s, starring alongside acting greats like James Cagney, Gary Cooper, and Gregory Peck. However, Payton's personal life was a chaotic disaster, chock full of affairs with seemingly every man she encountered, violent relationships, shoplifting, prostitution, and numerous run-ins with the police. The only thing that seemed to offer any stability to this troubled actress was the bottle. Primarily in the 1960s, her alcoholism worsened. After losing custody of her son due to her debauched lifestyle, Payton's life unraveled even further. For instance, in 1962, she was charged with public drunkenness for being found sleeping at a Sunset Boulevard bus stop dressed in a coat and bathing suit, and she was arrested the same year for drunken disorderly conduct during a boisterous afternoon party. It wasn't long after that she was spending night after night in bars and pubs, and at the age of 39, she was found dead of heart and liver disease. Her appearance so altered that she could hardly be identified. Number 19, Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi terrified audiences on screen, but his off-screen life was even more chilling. As his addiction took hold, he became a shadow of his former self, leading to terrifying moments for those around him. Bailey describes horror star Bela Lugosi as, toward the end of his life, a morphine addict and a terrible drunk. During one of their films together, director Ed Wood went to bring him his requested scotch and found him hiding behind a curtain. When Lugosi emerged, there were tears streaming down his face and a gun in his hand. Pointed straight at Wood, "Eddie, I'm gonna die tonight," he said. "I want to take you with me." Wood, a fellow drunk, realized what it would take to appease the now out-of-his-mind actor. Boilermakers, Lugosi's favorite drink. Lugosi put the gun down and drank himself to sleep. Number 18, Lon Cheney Jr. Lon Cheney Jr., famous for his horror roles, battled real-life demons just as frightening. His lifelong struggle with alcoholism ultimately led to a tragic end, mirroring the tormented characters he portrayed on screen. Crichton Tull Cheney, February 10, 1906 to July 12, 1973, known by his stage name of Lon Cheney Jr., was an American actor known for portraying Larry Talbot in the film The Wolfman in 1941 and its various crossovers, Count Alucard in Son of Dracula in 1943, Frankenstein's Monster in The Ghost of Frankenstein 1942, The Mummy in 3 pictures, and various other roles in many Universal Pictures horror films. Much like the wolf that he once portrayed, Lon Cheney Jr.'s personal demons would eventually get the best of him. His lifelong battle with alcoholism ultimately took its toll and was undoubtedly exacerbated by his inability to get roles that would allow him to stretch his acting muscles. Number 17, Leonard Nimoy.
A beloved alien and an even more beloved human being, Leonard Nimoy left Earth in 2015.
Leonard Nimoy, beloved as Mr. Spock, had his own battle with alcohol. His ritual of unwinding after shoots soon spiraled into addiction, affecting both his life and work until he sought help. Leonard Nimoy is best known for his enduring role as Mr. Spock from Star Trek. Unfortunately, the success of the show led him to drink, and what Nimoy called unwinding spiraled into a ritual of drinking wine, beer, or other spirits at the end of shooting every day. Eventually, he even started to sneak drinks on the set, disguised as water in a paper cup. Later, he checked himself into rehab, where he got clean. Number 16, Frank Sinatra.
One morning, we're at the Riviera, and I say, "Hey, come on down. Sinatra's coming." And Sinatra comes in wearing a members-only jacket, and it's got his name on it, Frank, like we didn't know who he was. And he's drunk, and he's kind of nasty.
Frank Sinatra, the iconic chairman of the board, lived in a high life married by addiction. His struggles with alcohol and prescription drugs were an open secret, impacting his career and personal life. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, was an emblem of American culture, a symbol of the golden age of jazz and swing and the personification of the high life. Yet, behind the glittering facade of sold-out shows and silver screen appearances, Sinatra grappled with personal demons, including a tumultuous relationship with alcohol and prescription drugs. Sinatra's early alcohol use was marked by the celebratory air of his newfound success. The entertainment industry at the time was steeped in a culture where alcohol was a mainstay. It was the era of the Rat Pack, where Sinatra and his fellow icons were often seen with a drink in hand, epitomizing the carefree spirit of the swing era. The bottle became a constant companion for Sinatra, known for his love of Jack Daniels. For Sinatra, the bouts of drinking began to take their toll. Instances of late-night brawls and canceled shows started to mar his professional image. Yet in these early stages of his career, Sinatra's relationship with alcohol seemed to fuel his legend as much as it forewarned of the struggles to come. As the pressures and pace of stardom intensified, Sinatra, like many of his contemporaries, began to rely on prescription drugs to manage the demands of his exhaustive schedule. Behind the glamour, the effects of Sinatra's substance use began to take its toll, the impacts reverberating through his professional life and intimate relationships. His prescription drug addiction and alcohol addiction became an open secret, punctuated by notable incidents that underscored the severity of his struggles. Number 15, Richard Burton.
Richard Burton was a man of many talents and accomplishments. He was a renowned Welsh actor, an accomplished author, and a celebrated stage performer. His commanding presence and powerful voice made him a force to be reckoned with on both stage and screen. However, despite his many successes, Burton's life was plagued by a number of personal demons, including a long-standing battle with alcoholism.
Richard Burton's baritone voice and dynamic acting were matched by his excessive drinking. Starting at age 12, his habit grew to 3 bottles of vodka a day, leading to a tragic early death. A magnificent actor, famed for his dynamic style, baritone voice, and relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton was described as a successor to the great Laurence Olivier and can still be seen in brilliant performances in films like his Oscar-nominated Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But old habits die hard. Burton claimed that he started drinking at the age of 12, and at its worst, he was drinking 3 bottles of vodka a day. In fact, during the filming of The Klansman, he was barely able to stand, and therefore took many of his shots sitting or lying down. Off-screen, he wasn't much better. He once downed 21 shots of tequila before diving into the sea when he heard of a reported shark sighting. In 1974, Burton almost died from a binge on hard liquor, and even a few years before, in 1970, doctors had warned him that alcohol abuse would eventually kill him. His destructive habit had caused his kidneys to grow to abnormal proportions, and his spine was found to be covered with crystallized alcohol. Ignoring the advice of medical professionals, his career ended abruptly in 1984 with his death at the age of 58, his body riddled with the effects of alcoholism. Number 14, Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy's charm on screen hid a dark secret: his life as a self-destructive drunk. His binges were so notorious that MGM had a Tracy squad on call 24/7 to manage his antics. Spencer Tracy, one of the most dashing leading men of Hollywood's golden age, was also secretly a self-flagellating, self-immolating, utterly filthy drunk, writes Bailey, who says that Tracy would hole up at the Hotel St. George in Brooklyn Heights for week-long binges, during which he was downing bottle after bottle of whiskey while sitting naked in a bathtub, never rising even to use the toilet. Tracy was perceived as such a possible danger that MGM, which had him under contract, assembled the Tracy Squad, an ambulance driver, a doctor, and 4 security guards dressed as paramedics who are on call 24/7. Every bar within 25 miles had been given a dedicated phone number, with instructions to call if Tracy ever entered. Once that happened, the squad rushed to the scene where, sure enough, Tracy would have by then caused some sort of drunken trouble. He was then whisked to his home under the guise of medical care, where the squad stood guard until he sobered up. Number 13, Clara Bo.
Starlet Clara Bo's mother suffered from acute psychosis and came to resent her daughter more and more as Clara grew up and grew beautiful. Then suddenly came the day it all unraveled. That terrible, secret day that would haunt Clara all the way to Hollywood and her own tragic end.
Clara Bo, Hollywood's original it girl, was known for her wild lifestyle. Her outrageous behavior, fueled by alcohol, shocked even the most jaded Hollywood insiders and made headlines. Clara Bo, a Brooklyn teenager whose mother was insane and whose father was a lecherous hanger-on, was the first to be christened an it girl after her most popular film, 1927's It. With her fame came license to shock the world, as Bo, who loved drinking, gambling, swearing, and screwing, was so licentious she could shock even jaded old Hollywood types. B.P. Schulberg, the president of Paramount, held a fancy dinner and invited Judge Ben Lindsay, who had recently lost his judgeship after publicly advocating for premarital sex. The judge, in a new career, was there to interview Bo for Vanity Fair, but when she arrived, soused, she introduced herself to the judge with a French kiss, never mind that his wife was right beside him, and then wrangled him into a dance, during which she deftly unbuttoned his shirt, then, arriving at his pants, she didn't hesitate and began to unzip them too. The judge jumped back, and Schulberg quickly removed Bo. Later, she expressed confusion at all the fuss. "If he likes all that modern stuff," she said, "how come he's an old stick in the mud?" Number 12, Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood's rebellious streak was legendary. Drinking wine with Sinatra at 15 was just the beginning. Her wild adventures, including a champagne bath gone wrong, became Hollywood lore. Natalie Wood was a wild child who was already drinking wine with Sinatra at age 15. A few years later, she found herself with her Rebel Without a Cause co-stars Dennis Hopper and Nick Adams. They decided to have a threesome, but Wood would only participate if she could bathe in champagne first, like Jean Harlow. Hopper and Adams bought several cases of champagne and poured it all into the bathtub. Once full, Wood disrobed and submerged herself, ready for her new sexual adventure, until she began screaming. As soon as her most sensitive areas came in contact with the alcohol, she shrieked in pain, Bailey writes. Thus, the orgy was extinguished. Number 11, Bud Abbott. Bud Abbott, one half of the legendary comedy duo Abbott and Costello, had a drinking problem that halted production by 2 p.m. daily. His lifelong struggle with alcohol began with a doctor's grim warning. William Alexander Abbott, October 2, 1987 to April 24, 1974, was professionally known as Bud Abbott. He was an American actor, producer, and comedian. He is best remembered as the straight man of the comedy team of Abbott and Costello with Lou Costello. During the making of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948, Bud Abbott would get so sloshed by 2 p.m. that he was incapable of shooting for the rest of the day. Abbott later explained that when he was young, a doctor told him that if he didn't stop drinking, he'd be dead by the age of 30. The straight man was so worried about the diagnosis, he stayed drunk for the next 40 years. Number 10, Peter O'Toole.
The late great Peter O'Toole, renowned for his mesmerizing talent, striking blue eyes, and larger-than-life personality, is no doubt one of the best actors of his generation. It's truly remarkable how he's achieved such recognition despite always being under the influence. Peter O'Toole confirms he was always drunk.
Peter O'Toole's legendary performances were matched by his legendary drinking. From Beirut to Paris, his wild sprees were the stuff of Hollywood legend, affecting his health and career. With 8 Academy Award nominations, performances in some of the most acclaimed films of all time, most notably Lawrence of Arabia, and also respected as a theater actor, it seemed like O'Toole could hardly do wrong on screen. His personal life, however, was quite another story. Even from early on in his acting career, O'Toole enjoyed his fair share of the bottle. During the filming of Lawrence of Arabia, his wild drinking sprees in the city of Beirut, Lebanon, were stuff of legend, and he was reportedly drunk for the duration of the filming of the 1964 classic Beckett. In fact, O'Toole and his drinking buddies were so often smashed that he fondly recalled going for a beer at one's local in Paris and waking up in Corsica. After suffering from abdominal pain and warnings that liquor would do him in, O'Toole finally gave up drinking, but his excessive consumption had already taken its toll. In 2013, he died in a London hospital, ravaged by years of drinking and chain smoking. Number 9, William Froley. William Froley, beloved as Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, was a notorious drunk. His drinking was so problematic that he negotiated time off for the Yankees World Series games, impacting his career. When Lucille Ball was negotiating with CBS to turn her radio show into I Love Lucy, 1951 to 1957, she was surprised to get a call from a character actor she knew named William Froley. "I hear you need someone to play your landlord." Lucy was in a quandary. She was from the old school where you help your fellow actors out if they're down on their luck. But Froley was a well-known drunk. She suggested he talk to her husband, Desi Arnaz. Froley promised Desi he'd never miss time due to drinking. But could Froley, who was an avid baseball fan, have time off if the Yankees made it to the World Series? Desi later regretted giving in to Froley's wishes. In the 50s, the Yankees made it to the series almost every year. Number 8, Broderick Crawford. Broderick Crawford's career was marked by his heavy drinking. Known for his role in Highway Patrol, his on-set antics and DUIs earned him the embarrassing nickname Old 502. Broderick Crawford is best remembered for 2 roles: his Oscar-winning turn as Willie Stark in All the King's Men in 1949, and as Chief Dan Matthews on the syndicated TV series Highway Patrol in 1955. Throughout his adult life, Crawford was prone to bouts of heavy alcohol consumption and was known for eating large meals. These habits contributed to a serious weight gain for Crawford during the 1950s. His weight and penchant for heavy drinking contributed to several injuries suffered on the set of Highway Patrol. It became particularly difficult for Crawford to perform certain scenes, such as when he had to enter and exit a police teleporter. In 1958, Crawford broke his ankle while exiting the teleporter and was forced to wear an ankle cast, which may be seen in some episodes. Crawford's heavy drinking increased during the filming of Highway Patrol, eventually resulting in several arrests and stops for driving under the influence of alcohol, which eventually gained him a suspended driving license. While representing the California Highway Patrol as Chief Matthews, Crawford was known with considerable embarrassment by the CHP as Old 502 due to his habit of driving under the influence of alcohol. Code 502 was the CHP police radio code for drunken driving. According to the show's creator, Guy Daniels, we got all the dialogue in by noon, or else we couldn't get it done at all. He, Crawford, would bribe people to bring him booze on the set. The show used their CHP technical advisor, Officer Frank Runyon, to keep the actor sober. I was told to keep that son of a bitch away from a bottle. I think his license was suspended. Some scenes had to be shot on private roads so that Broad could drive. Eventually, the drinking strained the show's relationship with the CHP, as well as Crawford's relationship with ZIV. Number 7. Bernard Lee.
If you carry a 00 number, it means you're licensed to kill, not get killed.
Bernard Lee, best known as M in the James Bond series, sank into depression and alcohol abuse after personal tragedies. His addiction was so severe, he drank through a straw fed through his dressing room keyhole. With 50 years of acting under his belt and over 100 film and television credits to his name, Lee certainly kept busy as a thespian. His most notable work is surely as M, the head of the British Secret Service in 11 of the James Bond movies. However, the tragic death of his beloved wife in a house fire, a vicious mugging, and unpaid debts caused Lee to sink into depression and alcohol abuse. In fact, his addiction was allegedly so strong that he was locked in his dressing room during breaks from the filming of the Edgar Wallace television series to prevent him from drinking. Still, Lee reportedly found a way. He hired a person to feed a straw through the keyhole, thus allowing him to enjoy it. In fact, prolific drinker Richard Burton purportedly admitted that he wasn't in the same league as Lee, who once drank him under the table. At the age of 73, Lee passed away due to stomach cancer, which can be and was most likely caused by his excessive alcohol consumption. Number 6. Dennis Price. Dennis Price, a British matinee idol, saw his career crumble due to alcohol. His addiction led to bizarre behavior, like appearing on stage during the wrong act, and ultimately to his death from liver cirrhosis. Coming from an aristocratic family and boasting good looks and charm, there wasn't much standing in the way of this British actor's success. Becoming a matinee idol on stage and scoring it big later with one of the finest comedies to come out of England, 1949's Kind Hearts and Coronets, Price and his contemporaries Alec Guinness and James Mason seemed poised to take on international acclaim. However, it was then that the drinking began to get out of control. Perhaps because of the anguish of his failing marriage, his hidden homosexuality, and for other unknown reasons, in 1954, Price found himself in his best suit with his head in the oven in his apartment. Though that suicide attempt failed due to the timely intervention of a cleaning woman, Price began a much more gradual suicide that involved his use of alcohol. Though he went on to star in popular British comedies and military dramas, his co-stars claimed that he would start on a crate of Guinness at breakfast and finish it by the end of the day, along with plenty of scotch. Reported to be drunk most of the time by his associates, he would faithfully show up to the studio with booze in a shopping bag, and he once ambled on stage during the first act of a play performing the final one. Near the end of his life, his once suave persona and charismatic good looks had been eroded by his addiction to the bottle, and he died, not surprisingly, of liver cirrhosis. Number 5. John Barrymore.
John Barrymore was a legendary Hollywood actor who started out in the era of silent films and managed to be just as successful when films with sound were introduced. This made John stand out from many of his silent film contemporaries, though the actor didn't have such great luck later in life. As a result of alcoholism, John suffered greatly in the later years of his life.
John Barrymore's brilliant career was overshadowed by his alcoholism. His habit became so severe that he needed cue cards to complete roles and even resorted to drinking cologne when desperate. This classical actor of the early 1900s was from the famed Barrymore family of thespians and praised as one of the greatest of his generation. He became known for playing sympathetic alcoholic characters on film. Ironic, as he himself was a raging alcoholic. Although known for his fantastic Shakespearean enactments, his performance as Mr. Hyde, and later his role as Sherlock Holmes, his tragic youth and difficult later years escalated his drinking to the point that his second wife once caught him trying to drink her cologne. He appeared later on a hit comedy film called Dinner at 8, directed by George Cukor and released in 1933. In it, he starred in one of his first films as a drunkard, playing an alcoholic actor. However, it wasn't many years later that his career was finally ruined due to his habit of returning to the bottle due to the effect that alcohol had on his memory. From the year 1936 on, he needed cue cards to complete his roles. A few of these roles would chronicle the tale of a man who sinks into a life of drinking and debauchery, and his hands shook uncontrollably. In 1942, at the age of 60, struggling with cirrhosis, kidney disease, and chronic edema, he finally crumpled and died not too soon after. Number 4, Robert Newton. Robert Newton, famed for his roles in Oliver Twist and Treasure Island, was such a heavy drinker that he once showed up on the wrong movie set, leading to an unexpected and hilarious filming incident. Another classic alcoholic was the British actor Robert Newton, who once got so inebriated he showed up on the wrong movie set. The happy producer put the big star in 4 scenes until people from the movie he was really supposed to be in came to haul him off. His reputation eventually made it difficult for him to find work. Producer Mike Todd interviewed Newton for the film Around the World in 80 Days. Your friend, David Niven, says you're a big drunk. My friend Niven is a master of understatement. Newton agreed to stay sober during filming and kept his promise. Number 3, Errol Flynn.
On screen, Errol Flynn often played the charming, sophisticated hero type, but off screen he was a different man. Rumors of his wayward, wild, often harmful lifestyle followed him around throughout his relatively short life. Some of the tales Flynn recounted in his autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, released after his death in 1959, were downright blood-curdling.
Errol Flynn, Hollywood's original swashbuckler, led a life of debauchery. From wild parties to public scandals, his drinking and antics were legendary, contributing to his early death at just 50. The original ladies' man, lauded as the definitive symbol of masculinity and virility, Errol Flynn is remembered as the archetypal swashbuckler in films playing heroes like Robin Hood and Captain Blood. Off-screen, however, his life was debauched, depraved, and daring to the highest extreme. A notorious womanizer, brawler, and cocaine user, he was also known for his love of the bottle. A drinking partner of Cuba's Fidel Castro himself, Flynn's fondness for alcohol was well documented. For example, a bachelor pad that he shared with actor David Niven in Malibu was so notorious for the copious amounts of alcohol drunk there that it was nicknamed Cirrhosis by the Sea. He also hosted sex, alcohol, and cocaine-fueled parties on his private boat. He would even show up to his film set smashed, once drunkenly wagering the film crew $500 that he could bed his co-star Olivia de Havilland. His decadent lifestyle caused him to collapse in an elevator in his early 30s, after which a doctor told him that his heart and lungs had been damaged. He nevertheless continued in his overindulgence, and he died at the age of 50 of a heart attack, his body bloated, overweight, and stricken with cirrhosis. Number 2, Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed's off-screen antics were even more outrageous than his on-screen roles. His drinking stories are the stuff of legend, culminating in a tragic and fittingly dramatic end in a pub. During the late 60s and early 70s, this English actor was one of the biggest box office draws in Britain. Renowned for his performances in films like The Trap Oliver and the Three Musketeers series, his persona off-screen wasn't as charming as those he played for the camera. He once confessed that he did not live in the world of sobriety. No truer words could have been spoken. Fellow actor and producer David Hemmings claimed that Reed could drink 20 pints of lager with a gin or creme de menthe chaser and still run a mile for a wager, and that he once drank 126 pints of beer in 24 hours and then performed a horizontal handstand on the bar. Known for wreaking havoc during his inebriated states, which included tomfoolery, violence, and infidelity, stories of his actions while intoxicated abound. In 1980, for instance, he went to a church for a christening so drunk that he swayed back and forth while standing, and at a reception held later, he held the baby in his arms and stumbled up and down the room pretending to play rugby with the child as the ball. He was also known for exposing his tattooed penis in public, bringing attention to it as his mighty mallet. He once climbed a chimney naked pretending to be Santa Claus, urinated on the Australian flag, and lay drunk on an airport baggage conveyor. Before he had completed the shooting of his final film, Gladiator, he went to a pub one night and drank 8 bottles of beer, 3 bottles of rum, and a few shots of whiskey, before finally suffering a heart attack and dying shortly after. Number 1. Humphrey Bogart.
If you can think of today's biggest actors, like you'd say Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, or even Will Smith, Al Pacino, Humphrey Bogart surpassed them all in his prime and in his day.
My name is Humphrey Bogart, in case there are those of you in the audience who are either too young or too old to know.
He has been called the greatest male actor in the history of American cinema. With multiple Oscar nominations and performances in classics like Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The African Queen, and countless others, it's not hard to see how Bogey has become one of the most respected in the pantheon of Hollywood thespians. However, in his personal life, Bogart was known as quite the drinker. One of his friends said Bogart's a hell of a nice guy until around 11:30 p.m. After that, he thinks he's Bogart. Then, he could become angry, stubborn, or even abusive when drunk, and later on in his illustrious career, it began to affect his work, as he frequently came to set either drunk or hungover. He once showed up in his pajamas, refusing to work and instead riding around the Warner Brothers studio on a bicycle. During his filming of the adventure film Sahara, he reportedly refused to leave his dressing room until his wife at the time, Mayo Methot, brought him a thermos of martini. Even off the set, Bogart could rarely last long without getting smashed, once drunkenly leaving a restaurant with their safe before deserting it on a Beverly Hills boulevard. He even got dragged into court after assaulting a few women who tried to take off with the toy panda that he had brought to an exclusive club as a drinking partner. Though he drank with the likes of Richard Burton and Frank Sinatra, he still got into trouble and was banned from pubs, bars, and clubs. His long-term love of drinking and smoking had a terrible effect on him in later years, as he was diagnosed with cancer in 1956 and died shortly after. Even in his last days, he could still be found with a glass of sherry in hand. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's wild past, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. Don't miss our other videos for more juicy Hollywood secrets and legends. See you next time.